What's up, Passionate DJs, and welcome to another episode of the Passionate DJ Podcast. I'm your host, David Michael, and this is a news update show. We do this about every quarter or so, where we kind of catch you up on all the latest news updates in the DJ and sort of related industries in the music space. And it's about time for us to do one of these, so we're basically going to be covering mostly things that are related to software and streaming and other industry-related things, and not so much hardware, because we recently covered pretty much all the hardware updates in our recent NAMM episode, which you can go back to just a couple episodes ago if you want to get the kind of complete picture of all the latest gear that's sort of coming out for DJs, the Akai Force, the Denon Prime 4, and all that good stuff, the new Technics turntable. We cover all that stuff, and plus we have a lot of individual videos that you can watch on the matter by just going to youtube.com/passionatedj and checking out all the videos there. So for all those hardware updates, you can go there, but for everything else that's been going on for the past, couple of months or so, we're going to kind of summarize those in today's episode and kind of give you the updates. So one thing that I do want to remind you is that Passionate DJ Podcast is supported via Patreon, and you can gain access to our monthly bonus episodes by visiting patreon.com/passionatedj and sign up to support us, and we will give you access to our monthly bonus episode containing deleted scenes and bonus segments that aren't in the actual original show. We put those together and give those to our patrons to thank you for supporting us and letting us put together this Passionate DJ thing and doing this show and all these other things that we love creating for you. So once again, thank you so much for those of you who signed up in the past week or so. We did get a couple of new patrons, so that's very exciting, and we're glad to be sharing that experience with you new supporters. So thank you so much. All right, moving on to our news updates. I want to start with basically some updates to software platforms in the DJ space. So I want to start out with Serato DJ because they just released their 2.1.1 update for Serato DJ Pro. And it gives you a couple of new things for you Serato users out there. So one thing is that it lets you sync up with all the newer Roland drum machines that have come out. So these are things like the TR-8S, the TR-8, the TR-08 and 09, so sort of the modernized 808, 909 kind of drum machines. You can actually connect those together and they will all sync and communicate really easily in that way. So that's pretty neat for those of you who own both of those pieces of gear. It seems like Serato and Roland integration stuff is kind of a thing now. They also added remapping capabilities for OSAs. Now, OSAs that stands for Official Serato Accessories, and this would be something like the Novation dicer, where you add the cue points and jump points to the corner of your turntable, or the Reloop Neon, or even the new Reloop RP8000 Mark II turntable. Basically anything that's sort of an official use Serato piece of hardware that communicates and is licensed for that purpose. So you can actually remap those things now. They're adding some more robust capability for those OSAs, and then they also made it so that you can have independent modes, pad modes per OSA device. So for example, let's say you have the RP8000 Mark II turntable, and it's got those buttons on the side, and maybe you use that as hot cues, but then you have, a Reloop Neon or something on the side, and you're using that in some other loop or slicer mode or something like that. They can actually be kept in separate modes now per device. So if you really want to sort of modularize and expand your Serato setup, you can easily do that by just adding that stuff on, and you don't have to switch modes based on what you're doing. You could be doing one thing over here and one thing over here, which is pretty neat. Some other things, they actually did a lot of bug fixes in this release. They fixed an issue where some large libraries would take a very long time to load, an issue where iTunes files wouldn't show the key tags properly. There was an issue that they fixed where files containing foreign characters would be marked as corrupt. An issue where spacebar and enter do not work with caps lock in play or offline mode. an issue with Serato Video, which caused the channel faders not properly fading the video. So they would move the channel faders, but nothing would happen in the video. So they fixed that. And then finally they fixed an issue where tracks could restart when toggling the views or setup screen while the Akai AFX is connected. So a very specific use case there. But lots of bug fixes and a couple of new features for you Serato users out there with this 2.1.1 release. Now, along those lines, Rekordbox is also in on the action. They actually released a beta of it would be their 5.4.4 beta of the Rekordbox software. And what this adds is actually a sort of cloud analysis function to Rekordbox. So what this does is it actually makes it so that rather than having to analyze every track and use your local computer, CPU power to do that analysis, it will actually first check and see if there is an existing thumbprint for that file already in their cloud database, in Pioneer's database. And if that thumbprint already exists, then rather than processing and calculating and doing all that to that file locally, it will just download the information. So anytime, the idea is that it reduces the overall time spent on music analysis by downloading it from the server whenever that's possible. Now, when I first heard this, I was a little kind of like, whatever. I mean, from a tech standpoint, it's kind of cool. I appreciate that, but am I really going to save that much time? It really only takes me, a few seconds to analyze a song. What's the real benefit? But then I really started thinking about this. If you have, for example, if you're moving platforms, from something else, and you get a terabyte of music for some reason, I won't ask why, or for whatever reason you're moving a large quantity of music from one place to another, and for whatever reason you don't have all that stuff, then when you expand it to hundreds or thousands of songs, you really could be saving a whole lot of time. And it's a greener way to go. There's less CPU cycles spent in this way, less heat generated and all that kind of stuff. So I get why they're doing it, and I'm sure that they're probably using that to mine some sort of data out of those analyzed tracks as well, and use that for future developments within the Rekordbox platform. But that's pretty interesting thing that they've added there. So like I said, basically the way it works is as you do an analyze function on a song in your Rekordbox library, Rekordbox will check to see if a fingerprint for that song already exists. If there is a match, Rekordbox will download the analysis file instead of generating one. If there's not a match, then that beat grid and all that metadata gets generated locally and then uploaded to Pioneer servers for other people to use. Now, just as a general disclaimer, remember that this is a beta release, and so you should exercise caution before, letting it touch your active Rekordbox collection or doing anything extreme. That word beta is there for a reason, so just bear that in mind. This is not an official full release to the public. Traktor, once again, has already gotten some updates. Now, we recently talked about the big Traktor Pro 3 announcement, especially in the NAMM episode and all that. We talked a lot about Traktor in the past several months. There's been a lot of development in that area, and they've already come out with a 3.1 update. So one thing that they add there is the ability to do what they're calling overmapping. And this is for like the Kontrol S4, S8, the D2, and the S2. And basically what this allows you to do is add custom mappings to your hardware, custom mapping functionality, but you can alter the function of a single knob or button or slider or whatever it is in sort of an additive way rather than having to sort of start from scratch and create a mapping from a blank template. This allows you to do it in an additive way, so hey, from now on, if I push button A4 or whatever the button is that translates to as a MIDI message, if I push this button, then I want it to do this function. And then it would default back, if that instruction were deleted, then it would default back to the normal use of that button. So before, in the past, you would kind of have to, okay, you want to remap this, you're on your own, and then you have to kind of start from scratch, whereas this will kind of overlay on top of the existing mapping. I hope I'm explaining that in a way that makes sense. Another thing that they added is the Standalone Mixer functionality for the S4 Mark III, which was released not too long ago, and this comes by way of a firmware update. So even though the hardware could support it, the firmware wasn't in a place where you could do that standalone mixing function, sort of like my Kontrol S8, where you can plug in turntables, but you don't have to have a laptop connected in order to use them. So like I said, this comes as a firmware update, and the filter still works just like the S8, so that part of it is hardware based. So if you're mixing turntables, external CDJ, something like that, you don't get access to all those cool Traktor-y effects and all that kind of stuff, but you do at least still get to use that filter, which is a nice touch. They give you some new view options in 3.1. You get a single deck sort of preparation view for just working on an individual track rather than, performing. And then a much requested feature, which is that of parallel waveforms. And you can do this in 2-deck or 4-deck mode, and all of the waveforms will go across the entire top of the screen on top of each other, so you can see them in a stacked way rather than having them separated into, left deck and the right deck and so on. So, this is customizable. This is not being forced on you. It's just another view that they've added on because it's highly requested. They added this, something we've talked about before, which is an external mixing mode. And basically, this bypasses all of Traktor's internal audio processing. So this gives you, basically, say you're connecting to a large-scale festival rig or a Function 1 system or something like that, and you don't want there to be any kind of special processing done by the software. You just want it to spit those files out the way that they arrived, and you're mixing on external outboard gear and stuff. Then you can do that. You can get that cleanest and clearest signal straight out of Traktor Pro, get it to front of house or wherever it's going. But they do let you still put a limiter on there so that you don't blow anything up. So it's nice to know that you still have that functionality. They added a tag writing mode. So basically this just lets you select whether or not you write metadata tags to the files themselves, or it just stores them in a local collection database. So if you were to have tag writing mode, the way I understand it is it will apply the tag to that file, and then that metadata, meaning the key, the title, the artist, and all that kind of stuff, and all of the beat grid information and all that actually moves with the file rather than just in one local database on your computer. And they also added, just as a small thing, tooltips to the preferences panel. So when you click on the little gear icon and it pulls up a control panel, it's pretty intimidating if you've never really gone and dug in through there, because a lot of terms are undefined and it's kind of hard to tell, is this internal mixing or external mixing, or what staging am I doing here? It's really confusing. So they've added actually tooltips to this, which is when you move your mouse over a particular function and you have the little bubble that pops up and says this is what this function does. So just making it a little bit easier on the Traktor user there. Now, speaking of native instruments, there was a recent Windows update that killed several Native Instruments products with no warning. And I was affected by this. In fact, if you go back to, we recently published an episode where I interviewed DJ Access, and we talked a little bit after the show. He wanted to check out my Machine Studio and my Kontrol S keyboard, which is a Native Instruments based sort of hybrid production and performance setup. And he was like, oh, let me see. I would really like to check out your setup, because he is also a machine user. And I said, I don't know what happened, man. I tried to use it last night and nothing would come up. It's like the hardware doesn't exist. I think something's wrong with it. Turns out it was a Windows problem, not a problem with the hardware, which I was happy to hear, because otherwise that would have been a very expensive problem. So basically, in the latest builds of, it has since been fixed. I want to preference it with that. So there was a Windows update that fixed this. But in the build of Windows 10, 8, and 7, the Kontrol S4 Mark II, the Machine Studio, and any Complete Control keyboard was just unrecognized by the OS. It just disappeared. Like I said, they have since fixed that problem, but it was definitely a little scary from my perspective, thinking that did I have a power surge? You know, what's going on? Everything comes up, but the OS doesn't recognize it. Well, if you've had that issue, make sure that you get your Windows updates run, and that should start working again. Does kind of make you think a little bit about the nature of having backups and redundancy and that sort of thing, because if I had been performing with any of this gear and had a gig that night or that week, I would have just kind of been up a creek without a paddle. So a little scary. We've talked quite a bit about backups and redundancy in the past. Definitely check out some of our back catalog for more information on that, but the long and short of it is that should be good to go now. Just make sure you have the latest updates. Now, MixVibes Cross DJ. This is another lesser-known DJ software. They had a new release. They came out with Cross DJ 4. And they added stuff like an album cover view when you're browsing tracks in your library. They also added parallel waveforms. This is something that everybody wants now for some reason. Customizable UI through, and I wish I knew how to pronounce this, Maquillage? Anyway, it's a scripting language of some kind, and you can use the scripting language to actually customize the UI in great detail, which is pretty interesting. They added touchscreen compatibility to the software, so if you're using a tablet or a hybrid device like that has a touchscreen, should work just fine with MixVibes Cross DJ 4. They added 3 synchronized effects per player, and then they allow you to create your own effects with something that they call the tweaker, which is pretty interesting. And then they actually integrated SoundCloud Go into the service as well. So this is another thing that the DJ software is doing, is they're incorporating cloud-based and streaming-based music services to the DJ software, because that's where everybody else is going for their music. So it was sort of inevitable that people would start taking on this. We've seen it in the form of SoundCloud streaming, Spotify streaming. We've seen some Tidal, and all the developments with Beatport, which we'll talk about here shortly. Now, some other things that they updated in this latest release of Cross DJ, they improved the autoplay function. They added phrase analysis, so this helps you find the intro and the outro and sort of the best parts of the track, maybe breakdowns and stuff. They analyze the phrasing instead of just the beat grid. They added Master Clock and Ableton Link support, so this allows you to basically synchronize your DJ set with anything that supports either a MIDI clock or Ableton Link, which would be my preferred method. I'm really happy to see that people are adding Ableton Link capability, because it really is just as simple as clicking a button and joining it to an already existing time network. I mean, it's just fascinating. I tried this the other day with my Traktor setup and added Machine Studio, which was running on a completely different platform. I was running Traktor on a Mac on my desk or on my DJ booth, and then I was running Machine on a desktop PC running Windows 10, and literally all I had to do is I started playing they were connected to the same network, my Wi-Fi network, and then I started playing a track on Traktor, and then I opened Machine and I clicked the link button, and it said, oh, I see that there's something else connected to Ableton Link, and it synced up and everything played in perfect time. So Ableton Link is just the name of a protocol, to be clear on that. It's not a program. It really doesn't have anything to do with Ableton Live, the program. It just gives you the ability to do this super simple synchronization of DJ stuff or music stuff, which is really nice, rather than having to get really complicated with it. You just click a button, and if it sees something on the network, it just syncs and works. Pretty fascinating. They added a remote app, so this is something on either iOS or Android that allows you to kind of have a second screen experience to use for various things in the software. They added little panes for track match and track playlist. Not entirely sure what those are, because I'm a little less familiar with Cross DJ. I actually haven't opened Cross DJ in a little while, so I might need to get a little more familiar with that. But they did also add, and this is pretty big, the ability to import and export from Rekordbox, Serato DJ, Traktor, and Virtual DJ. You can import and export from all of those libraries. Now, I don't know how complete that functionality is. I don't know if it imports the beat grids, the cue points, and everything perfectly, or if there are limitations to that. But this is something that a lot of people are starting to do. Denon's really leading the charge on this with being able to import and convert between various libraries. And pretty interesting to see that things are getting at least a little bit more universal in that sense. Of course, then they added the ability to export to external USB. So presumably this would be a similar functionality to Rekordbox, where you can prepare a playlist or a collection, export it to USB, and then play it on a different setup. Now, in a bit of sad news, the app Kato has shut down recently. Now, this was an app that let you drag a song from your DJ collection and then into it, and then it would pull a track list. It would pull track list data from thousands of other DJs, so you could kind of see like what was played before and after this track, and by whom and how often. So, sort of building a bit of overall metadata for music and the way that DJs played it. Operations for Kato will actually cease on the 31st of this month, March 31st, and all subscriptions have already been canceled. So yeah, Kato is just done. Now, this was an app that was founded by two former Twitter and Google employees in collaboration with Ian Golden from DJ Tech Tools. So apparently this didn't work out. It was a good idea. Maybe somebody else will pick up where Kato left off, but as it stands now, it has been shut down and all subscriptions are canceled. Now, in a bit of maybe happier news, depending on who you are, the Rain 12 has been allowed in DMC competitions. Now, the Rain 12, if you're not familiar, once again, you can hit up that YouTube channel, youtube.com/passionatedj. We talk a little bit about the Rain 12s. When I was in California for NAMM, I actually met with one of the representatives and kind of asked him about the 12s and the Rain 72, which is the mixer it would usually be paired with. And just wanted to get the updates because I knew they'd been working on it. And so he told me some of the updates they made to the latest iteration of the 12s. But anyhow, the DMC has announced that this is actually a valid piece of hardware to use in DMC competition, where traditionally it has been limited to strictly analog turntables, such as the Technics 1200. This is a new thing because the Rain 12 has no tone arm, has no stylus or needle, has none of that stuff. It's, in the strictest sense, it's a controller. It's used with Serato DJ, and for all intents and purposes, it is a turntable, except for, I guess, you can't needle drop with it. Maybe there's one or two things you can't do, but besides that, it's basically a digital turntable, for lack of a better term. And so they say Rain and DMC are excited to jointly announce that the Rain 12 motorized turntable controller is now officially accepted as performance hardware in the DMC Mixing Championship events from this year onwards. Now, this announcement includes all regional heats, finals, and the online competitions. To support this, Rain is offering custom-made 12-inch acrylic control discs to any DJ that competes in the 2019 DMC globally using the 12s. Now, once again, the question for this is going to be, is this good news or is this blasphemy, right? Because so many people in the DMC community are really purists about this kind of stuff. And there's been, in the past, there's been big hubbubs about, is it okay to use DVS and timecode and that sort of stuff, digital vinyl solutions. Can we use that in competition? And eventually that won out. And I'm going to assume that eventually, as more things like the Rain 12 become accepted in competition, that it will be somewhat normalized. But there are still people who really complain about the purity of the competition, because this is meant to be a turntablism event. And the Rain 12 is just one of those pieces of gear that really blends that line between the modern digital world and the sort of traditional classic analog DJ world. All right, now I just want to take a moment to talk about music streaming. And the reason I want to talk about music streaming is because it has obviously just completely dominated the industry. There was recently an RIAA report that said that streaming services now account for 75% of music revenue. So digital downloads are almost half of industry sales, but they dropped by a quarter from last year, or from 2017 rather. So they are falling fast, and everything is really moving full steam ahead towards streaming, which is why it makes sense for so many of these DJ apps to be integrating streaming and cloud services into their software. But interestingly, and possibly sort of ironically, vinyl sales saw its most profitable year since 1988 last year at $419 million. Now, speaking of streaming, it's almost time for Beatport Link. Now, what this is actually in-software integration of the Beatport library. So basically what's happened is it was based on Pulse Locker technology. So if you're familiar with Pulse Locker, Beatport purchased that service in 2018, and now we know why. They want to build this in as part of a Beatport provided service to DJs. So basically how it works is you'll store songs in an offline locker, and then that makes it available for use in DJ apps. So it'll download it or cache it locally, and then presumably it will either analyze that music or will give you access to cloud data of the analysis of that track, and then just make it available for you to use whether or not you're connected to the internet, as I understand it. Now, they haven't yet announced which platforms this is going to work with, but Pulse Locker was integrated with Serato DJ Pro, Virtual DJ, and Rekordbox DJ, so I would expect them to show up on those platforms. Now, I have a quote here. Beatport's purchase of Pulse Locker early in 2018 paved the way for the company to seamlessly integrate its store into DJ performance software, enabling DJs to easily access a massive catalog of music. The first integrations of the Beatport Link product with leading DJ performance software applications will be completed in the coming months. Beatport will have an online a la carte download store as well as Beatport Link as a subscription service that allows music to be played directly into performance software and stored in offline mode via the company's proprietary locker technology. It's a whole brave new world out there for DJs when it comes to digital and cloud and streaming. Now, speaking of Beatport, we're actually going to be seeing the return of BeatSource. Now, if you haven't been a DJ for very long, you might not remember BeatSource, but this actually existed before. This was a sort of a sister product to Beatport, and I remember it being pretty centered around hip-hop, though the new version is actually going to cater a little bit more to open format DJs. So basically what's happened is Beatport has partnered with DJ City for this effort, and they're going to, like I said, cater to open format and sort of top 40 DJs who kind of need access to those charting songs and take requests and all that kind of stuff. So they're going to make DJ City's record pool that they have accessible within BeatSource, and all this stuff that we're talking about right now will actually work with Beatport Link, what we just talked about, which will potentially make this a great resource for somebody like Mo Dingo, who does a lot of mobile DJs, mobile gigs and weddings and stuff like that. So if you need access to all that kind of top 40 stuff, BeatSource will help make that possible. So Beatport is they're keeping Beatport as maybe their more underground dance music, EDM based service, but also partnering with DJ City and bringing up this BeatSource thing to cater to the other side of the equation. Just continuing through some news items here on today's episode of the Passionate DJ podcast. We're looking at a bit of tension between Spotify and Apple Music. Recently, Spotify actually filed a complaint with the European Commission. Apparently they tried to resolve the issue directly with the Apple Music team, but they didn't have any success going down that path. But they're alleging that, so what happens is when you pay for something through the Apple App Store, Apple kind of applies a 30% tax to any payments that go through their system, and that payment system, Apple Pay, is forced upon anybody using the Apple Store. You have no way to set up like a custom PayPal account or something like that to pay for your apps. And so Spotify is saying that because users have to put a 30% tax on top of everything, it causes Spotify to have to inflate their prices, and that gives Apple Music an unfair advantage as a streaming platform. So this comes from complex.com. Spotify has hit Apple Music with a complaint overseas alleging, quote, unfair advantages in connection with App Store matters. Spotify founder Daniel Ek announced that following careful consideration, he and his team had decided to file a complaint against Apple with the European Commission. Now, they're, of course, responsible for ensuring fair and non-discriminatory competition. Now, Spotify alleged that they previously tried to resolve their issues directly with Apple Music, though those efforts apparently didn't go their way. To illustrate what I mean, let me share a few examples, Ek said. Apple requires that Spotify and other digital services pay a 30% tax on purchases made through Apple's payment system, including upgrading from our free to our premium service. Now, if we pay this tax, it would force us to artificially inflate the price of our premium membership well above the price of Apple Music. And to keep our price competitive for our customers, that's something that we just can't do. Now, Ek noted that he doesn't consider what Spotify is asking for special treatment. Instead, he named other apps like Uber, which aren't affected by Apple's alleged tax practices. Within the complaint, Spotify is hoping for apps to, quote, compete fairly on the merits in the App Store and for customers to have the option to choose their own payment system. Apple actually came back at Spotify and released a statement. They say that Spotify wants to keep all the benefits of the App Store ecosystem, including the substantial revenue that they draw from the App Store's customers, without making any contributions to that marketplace. And even a little harsher than that, a little more caustic than that, Tim Cook, the CEO of Apple, actually released a statement, and he said, "We share Spotify's love of music and their vision of sharing it with the world. Where we differ is how you achieve that goal. Underneath the rhetoric, Spotify's aim is to make more money off of others' work. And it's not just the App Store that they're trying to squeeze, it's also the artists, musicians, and songwriters." Now, in a bit more positive news, Warner Music has actually made a deal with Dubset. Now, Dubset is sort of a startup company that helps DJs publish licensed songs and monetize. So this has been a problem ever since things like streaming and going, Facebook Live and YouTube streaming and all this stuff has come into play here. We've all been struggling to figure out, how do we legally do what we're trying to do in this giant industry of DJing that exists when we get cut off at every turn by, DMCA takedown complaints or algorithmic takedowns on different platforms because, you're playing a song that doesn't belong to you, you're not allowed to do this, and then you have to try to file a complaint to get it resolved, and it's just ridiculous. So Dubset is trying to be sort of a middleman to step in and kind of fix these issues directly with major players like Warner. So this would help give you access to artists like Daft Punk, Bruno Mars, Cardi B, and not get that stuff taken down, which is pretty great. So the sets can be distributed via Spotify and Apple Music is kind of what they're mainly focused on at the moment. And Warner is not the only ones to do this. They actually, Sony was the first to partner with Dubset, and that happened in August of 2017. Following that, Tidal and then another one called Merlin came in and joined them. And then in October of this past year, SoundCloud actually partnered with Dubset and they added them as a distribution channel. So they're stepping in and trying to fix, like I said, this real issue that we DJs have, with just trying to publish our work. They posted this as part of their newsletter, they being Dubset. It says Dubset's team has worked tirelessly to expand its catalog, giving DJs a broader set of tracks to use in DJ sets that can be distributed to streaming services. The licensed songs that DJs can include in their mixes has expanded at a blinding rate, due in large part to deals signed with Sony Music Entertainment, Warner Music Group, and Merlin, also known as the Fourth Major. Now, speaking of distribution, SoundCloud Premiere is something we need to talk about, and this helps you get payouts from all the major music services. For example, Amazon Music, Apple Music, even Instagram, Spotify, YouTube Music. at no additional cost. If you are a SoundCloud Pro or Premiere user, you can actually get distribution to those channels and get royalty payouts through those services. From the SoundCloud blog, they say, with the first and only distribution tool built directly into a streaming platform, you can think of SoundCloud account as a mission control for your music. The only place where you can share tracks instantly, connect with your fans, manage your content, and get paid for your plays everywhere. Simply choose from your uploaded tracks and albums and distribute to all major services while keeping 100%, that's key, while keeping 100% of your rights and payouts. We take nothing. And getting streamlined payments directly from SoundCloud. Our direct monetization program, SoundCloud Premiere, is available at no additional cost to all eligible Pro and Pro Unlimited subscribers who are 18 years of age or older, creators of original music, have 0 copyright strikes, that might be key for some of you, and at least 1,000 monetizable track plays. Now, a bit of interesting news. We recently talked about the Fire Festival. We recently did an episode called Crossfire. That was, if you want to listen to that, it was passionatedj.com/172, where me and the other co-hosts watched both of the recent documentaries, the Netflix one and the Hulu one. We all watched them, and then we got together and sort of did a reaction episode. You can get that in episode 172. Well, recently, they actually announced that there was going to be a Fire Festival merch auction. And so this is your chance to win, Fire Festival t-shirts and other, merch from the infamous festival that never was. So all of the proceeds of that event, all of the proceeds go to the people who were scammed. So if you recall the story, Billy McFarland left a $25 million debt when his event collapsed, and he's currently serving a 6-year sentence in a New York City jail following his guilty plea to fraud. So if you want to get some Fire Festival swag, this is your opportunity to do so, which actually might not be a terrible idea depending on how this whole Fire Festival thing ends up sitting within history, because right now it's pretty, however you want to put it, popular, famous, well-known, because it was this big Netflix and Hulu thing, and there was controversy behind the documentaries themselves and all that. The question is anybody going to care about Fire Festival in 5 or 10 years? And if so, maybe this stuff will be worth some money, which is a pretty interesting idea. Now, I do want to talk really quickly about just an iconic track that you all know, and that is Kernkraft 400 by Zombie Nation. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because it actually recently turned 20 years old. It celebrated its 20th anniversary on March 18th. And actually, a lot of people don't know this, but the most well-known version of that song, the one that you hear in stadiums like this, actually is the DJ Gius remix, which sounds like this. Now, I have a quote from the creator of the song saying, "It was a weird feeling because this track kind of became the original. A lot of labels didn't bother to say that it was a remix." There was actually a recent story posted. There was actually a short documentary, it's 15 or 20 minutes long. I think Vice posted it, talking about Kernkraft 400 and the story behind that track. It was actually a pretty troubled track and had a lot of hurdles to get released. And one part of that story is actually something that I was familiar with many years ago, just being an old gaming nerd. And that is that the song actually originates from an old 8-bit Commodore 64 song. It was called Lazy Jones, and the music producer on that, or the composer on that game, was David Whittaker. So this melody from Lazy Jones actually was created in 1984, so way back in the day, back in the early 80s. David Whittaker creates this, is actually a series of songs. It's kind of interesting. The game, you walk into different little rooms, and there's different things for you to do in those rooms, and each room that you walk into, there's sort of a variation on a theme of the music. So there's kind of a constant tempo and a constant chug, just kind of that dun 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 dun, and they play different melodies on top of it. And in one of the rooms, there was a song called Stardust, and that song Stardust eventually got picked up by Zombie Nation and was turned into the song that we all know from stadiums and sporting events across the world. David Whittaker was ultimately paid some undisclosed sum in order to be able to use that melody once it was discovered. But pretty fascinating song with a pretty fascinating history. You should look into that and learn more about it because it's a cool story. Now, we are coming to the end of the news here, but I do need to unfortunately wrap up with a bit of sad news that many of you have probably heard by now, and that is the passing of Keith Flint of the Prodigy. And this kind of came as a shock to a lot of people in the music industry. He was pretty young, and it was sad to see such an icon leave the industry and leave this world. He's had so much influence, along with the Prodigy, on music in general, but especially with electronic music and dance music and EDM and all these things that we may enjoy now. He was at the forefront of not just that band, but of that movement. And so definitely here at Passionate DJ, we send our love and condolences out to the entire family and those affected by Keith's passing. And I did want to just end with a couple of quotes by some, DJs and other people who have reacted to Keith's passing. The Prodigy themselves posted, "It's with deepest shock and sadness that we can confirm the death of our brother and best friend, Keith Flint. A true pioneer, innovator, and legend. He will be forever missed. We thank you for respecting the privacy of all concerned at this time." We also got a reaction from Adam Bayer. "The Prodigy played a big role in my early raving and DJ years, and I remember being blown away by Charlie on XL recordings in '92. Thanks for all, Keith. We shall all be dancing in heaven together soon enough. Safe travels, R.I.P." Ed Simons of the Chemical Brothers says, "Such sad news about Keith Flint." He posted a photo, and he said, "This photo is him unexpectedly joining us on stage in 1995. He managed to kick the power out, but no one minded. He was Keith from the Prodigy, and he could do whatever he wanted. He was a lovely and generous man, full of spirit. Rest in peace." The Black Madonna posts, "R.I.P. Keith Flint. I damn near burned a hole through the Prodigy experience in '92 when there wasn't a lot of accessible dance music in Kentucky. It was a huge deal for me. I can't overstate it. I'm very grateful to have had proof that this world I wanted so badly actually existed." Andy C. said, "Such an incredibly sad day. Keith was a gentleman, one of the nicest people you could ever meet, one of the greatest frontmen of all time, and a true icon of the rave generation. Sending love to all of the Prodigy family. R.I.P. Keith." Skrillex said, "I may have not had a career if it wasn't for you, Keith. You made me feel welcome in a time when I needed it. Thanks for all the laughs, my friend. Rest in peace." Pete Tong said, "I'm sad to wake up to the news that we lost Keith Flint, a true original. The Prodigy have made a huge contribution to dance culture and electronic music all around the world. Keith's contribution as the band's iconic frontman was immense. He will be dearly missed. R.I.P." And then finally, a reaction from Dylan Francis, who said, "Wow, R.I.P. Keith Flint. I remember listening to Breathe on MTV when they used to show music videos, and I was so enthralled by that video. I went and bought their album, The Fat of the Land, and was obsessed ever since. Sending love to his friends and family, Dylan Francis. I only thought it appropriate to go ahead and send out with a piece of music from The Prodigy. So this is the track Breathe. I'm sure you'll remember it. Listen to it and remember all the positive memories from the first time you heard The Prodigy. And I hope you enjoyed this little update episode of the Passionate DJ podcast. Don't forget to check us out at patreon.com/passionatedj. Check out our YouTube channel at youtube.com/passionatedj. And check out our merch at passionatedj.com/merch. But for now, this has been the Passionate DJ podcast. Rest in peace, Keith. Keep on spinning.